Welcome, Olivier Dess. I am the general editor at AEF Info. Thank you for being here to conclude the General Assembly on the mobility of apprentices hosted by Europe Mobility. Yesterday we heard from political and institutional players, and then we had a workshop in the afternoon. This morning we would like to hear from companies, smaller and bigger ones, around a round table. And we will talk about what's at stake when it comes to apprenticeship within a mobility context. And then we will get back to what was said yesterday. And then we will hear from Jean Arthuis, who will present to us the manifesto suggesting proposals for a Europe of apprentices. So without further ado, let's now hear from small and bigger companies to know what their expectations are, what their suggestions are to improve mobility and to get to know how we can remove barriers and make Europe a place for mobility of apprentices. Now, let's hear from Rachel Compin at Angie. Eric Kaiser, artisan baker, founder and manager of Eric Kaiser Bakeries. Pascal Bretomé, founder and leader of Garages Bretomé. Jeannie Rabotin, entrepreneurs and artisan in buildings and president of France Training Centers for Apprentices, and Jean-Christophe Siberas, who plays several roles but will today be the global deal coordinator. So before discussing the matter, let's watch Corentin's testimony, who opted for mobility. I went for it, and you should do the same, because I've learned a great deal. My name is Corentin Savary. I am 22 years old. I am training with Compagnons du Devoir. I am a baker. I opted for mobility in the Czech Republic. I spent a year in Prague from 2018 to 2019 and was a baker there. What were the hurdles that you faced? Administratively speaking, it was a challenge to fill out all the paperwork between the Czech Republic and France, and getting ready for a trip in a country that was unknown to me and in a company in which I didn't even speak the language. But I was very much supported, and a great deal has been done in France and in the Czech Republic. What did it bring you? Professionally, it made me gain confidence. It was highly gratifying because I left for a foreign country. It was the first time for me. I was 19, I was living and worked on my own. What would you tell someone who wants to go? Going abroad can be impressive, but you shouldn't be scared of the unknown. Maybe you might be thinking, oh, I should go for comfort, but no, go for it, because this is a great experience and you will learn a lot. What do you have to tell to training centers? You should support them and not hold them back. If they want to opt for mobility, listen to them. You can always tweet and use the hashtag EGMA. You have now listened to Corentin's testimony, and he said that mobility made him learn a great deal. And he also said that there was a great deal done in France and in the other country, in the Czech Republic. And the other side, this other side he was talking about, was also all the players in the field, like companies that are here to make mobility a possibility. So thank you for being here this morning. During this roundtable, we will hear from you, companies, because without you, nothing would be possible when it comes to mobility. We will hear some figures this morning. Yesterday, we heard that there were less than 7,000 apprentices that opted for mobility in 2018-2019. When it comes to companies, about 1,000 companies have welcomed apprentices from abroad. So we can always improve the situation, and the figures show it. So let's now turn to you to learn how we can make things improve. So, Mr. Berthomé, you are employing 12 people, including 4 apprentices in your garages. And you have welcomed foreign apprentices as well. So could you tell us more about this? Good morning, everyone. How did it go? It was simple because this is a family enterprise. And I was asked to host a foreign apprentice from Hungary. And he was actually in touch with Mr. Arthuis, who was trying to help foreign students opt for mobility, and it's hard to find a welcoming company. I am used to training apprentices. I have trained over 50 of them, so for me, it only sounded natural. So this young apprentice from Hungary arrived. I didn't tell my employees at first because I was a bit scared of their reaction. I told them that we would go through a new experience when it comes to apprenticeship, but I didn't tell them, I actually didn't tell them that this student would stay that long with us. He arrived and it went well. The only hurdle was that my employees do not speak English, and I also have a technical diploma, so I never really learned English at school, unfortunately. But because we work in a workshop, we set up the Wi-Fi to try to communicate. And then one day, an apprentice supervisor came to me and was like, okay, we need to communicate better, find a better solution. So how did you help your employees understand that they shouldn't be scared? It was very easy. I told them, you see, he's been here for a week and he's not interested in learning French, so it might be hard to hire him. So try to communicate with him and see what his background is. So this apprentice supervisor wasn't very interested in him, and then he asked why he was there, and then the student said, I'm interested in garage learning because my dad was a mechanic. So you needed to explain things and do work on communications. But once this was done, what did your employees learn from it? They were actually really proud of this experience, because they were speaking English. The student was speaking English within the workshop. Everyone heard about it in the village, and the employees were there to support him. And after a few days, they said that Norbert had his driver's license, so we should maybe lend him a car. And so employees were highly satisfied. So this was a great experience, wasn't it? Yeah, it was actually a pleasure and very satisfying to have him. I was very happy to host him, but I would like to also send apprentices. Yeah, of course, we need reciprocity. We will deal with that later. Now, Mr. Kaiser, you are the founder and manager of Eric Kaiser Bakeries, 900 salaries, about 100 apprentices, and you are also in many countries around the world. In a few years' time, you experienced mobility with Compagnons du Devoir. I don't like that you call my company a chain, because it is actually a network. We are in 32 countries today, so we hire a lot of apprentices. I was myself an apprentice at Compagnons du Devoir, and we learn, and passing on knowledge and skills was highly important at Compagnons du Devoir. I had an experience with Jean-Claude Bélanger, who is here with us, and we wanted to train apprentices and send them all over the world. So we sent them to Europe, then to Japan, and then to the United States. And this can be complex because no one was there to actually carry out the follow-up. And I remember one young people who had a hard time when he locked himself out of his apartment in Tokyo, when we had to call the police, etc. So that was a bit of a hardship. So what we notice is that we need to teach learners another language. I have traveled a lot. I've tried to learn English, but other languages because it was essential in my career path, and I understood this later on in my career. So I would like to pass this on to apprentices. So we need to give them the wish to learn them a foreign language. And then we also need the infrastructure to follow and support all those young people. So you have an HR department in France that is dealing with them, but how does it work with other countries? At the time, we didn't have a lot of coordination between companies, so we relied on our local structures. What matters when passing on knowledge and skills, when we were sending apprentices in Russia or the Ukraine, we passed on our methodologies as well. We explained how it worked, and that's what we did with people coming from Russia and other countries in France. I remember an apprentice who was crying because they missed their family, so we tried to integrate them within our companies and make them feel comfortable. So in spite of those hurdles, you have continued this experience. But isn't there a lack of information when it comes to employers and especially smaller companies? I personally think that the government is pushing for more mobility. We saw it yesterday with the speech of the French President of the Republic. And of course, we need to walk the talk. But I think that we need to work better when it comes to infrastructure. But we also need to push for these apprentices to want to go abroad, to show them that other young people have done it and that this is a positive experience and they will reproduce it. Now, Mr. Rabotin, you also, you have worked in public works and you are a craftsman. You are the president of training centers in France. You train thousands of apprentices. Yesterday, the president of the French Republic said that we should have the same ambition for apprentices that we have for students. So this is indeed an ambition that we have, and this is the benefits of mobility from a cultural point of view. At BTP CFA France, mobility only lasts for 4 weeks, so short-term mobility for contract assurance reasons, insurance reasons, but we would like to go beyond those 4 weeks because mobility is highly beneficial. So why are you limiting it to 4 weeks? It is possible to do it longer right now, because we are working in craftsmanship, and that means very small companies with 1 or 2 employees and 1 apprentice alongside. So when an apprentice goes abroad, there is a lack of skills. So how can we compensate? So we need to work on reciprocity, because when an apprentice opts for mobility, they should be replaced by a foreign apprentice, because we are here to integrate them. But that requires reciprocity as well. For now, we don't have that. We need to improve on that, yes, as a matter of fact, because when it comes to welcoming them We have differences between their contracts and ours.
We are going to talk about these issues about short-term mobility, especially in small companies. For Crofton's, what are the main obstacles today? Contracts, work contracts. After some time, apprentices are the responsibility of the host country, of the host country's conditions. So the company has to be responsible for the apprentice, and I think that is the main obstacle. When you mean work contracts, do you mean salaries, healthcare, social rights? So what do you think you would have to do? We need to harmonize the system at a European level. That is going to take years. Yes, but I think we can do it step by step. I'm certain we will hear suggestions during the roundtable about this. Rachel Campin, I would like now to ask you, as the social manager at ENGIE, could you explain us how your association works? And you also represent Europe Mobility. So could you tell us what you do? Good morning to all of you. Thank you very much for having a woman at this round table. I can see we made an effort. It's just one woman, but it's better than nothing. So I wanted to say that. Thank you to the organizers. I am here as part of the Global Apprenticeship Network. We have a network all around the world. This is an organization of large companies which are interested in mobility and apprenticeship, with companies who want to help young people in their vocational training, help them have a mobility experience. In France, there are companies such as Nestlé, Vinci, ENGIE, which are doing this. In 2020, we had about 30,000 apprenticeship contracts. That shows that there is mobility for young people's training. In Cannes, France, I would like to thank Jean Arthuis for your work on this. At GAN, we believe we have to work on young people's mobility. Why? Because our companies are globalized, and we all want skills, and young people acquire those skills in France, in training centers, thanks to our education system, our training system. But those young people also need to go abroad to train, because you learn more when you see different things, when you see different ways of working. You were talking about globalized companies. That is not the case of all companies. Do you agree with what representatives from smaller companies say? For example, when they talk about some issues such as contracts, such as languages, what do you have to say about this? Well, I think we often make a distinction between large companies and small companies and craftsmen. But I think if we're all here together today, it's because we have the same objective. We want to help young people go abroad. Of course, larger companies have more means for mobilities, but we all are aware that we are all interested in mobility. On the one hand, for a young person to go abroad, they need to speak foreign languages. Nowadays, we can see that there is a problem with this. Young people do not learn languages at school enough. Young people have to speak foreign languages, at least one foreign language, in order to continue the training. And second obstacle, I think it was really clear in this roundtable. Administratively speaking, contracts, healthcare, salaries, how to house the apprentices. They go to a foreign country they don't know, in an unknown place. So we have to help them make their lives easier. We need to harmonize, as was already mentioned. We need to have a simple framework for companies and for young people. Sorry to insist on this, but large companies have subsidiaries abroad. It is easier for them than for smaller companies, which have to solve their problems on their own. That is an added challenge for smaller companies. That is true. Indeed, it is more difficult for smaller companies. But Europe Mobility can help them precisely on this. They can facilitate contracts at a European level. That is something we need. And I know it. That is why you work on this. We need to improve this system. We need to harmonize our practices, which will help companies when they are not as large as the company I represent. And maybe it's too early to talk about this, but there are solutions. We will come back to solutions later. I will finish that first roundtable with you. You were working for human resources in large companies. You founded Neurology's council firm. And you worked for Global Deal, and you are also president of a training center. What can you tell us about Global Deal? What is that structure, that organization? Global Deal is an initiative that was born in 2016 in Switzerland in order to add value to what companies do for more responsible globalization. Globalization was at threat, according to us, despite the fact that some people are doing things well. So France committed in 2017. Now we have 21 countries with a platform in each country. Several ministers for labor asked me to be part of that. We hire about 2.7 million people around the world. As a Global Deal, large companies make commitments, but how can you explain that mobility is so low nowadays? Indeed, we don't have a lot of mobility experiences. 7,000 apprentices out of 25,000 apprentices. So there is a lot of room for improvement. And there are obstacles. I tried personally in my company to improve this mobility. It is easier to send someone to a subsidiary abroad. But from a practical point of view, we noticed that there were linguistic obstacles, even for colleagues who were going to host someone. For example, in Germany, we had to insist on the fact that even if the apprentice didn't speak the language well, you could still host them, because young people can learn a language. When they are in the right environment, they can learn very quickly. Sometimes there are lack of linguistic skills, but that can be solved. So do you think you have to convince people in companies? I believe so, yes. That is part of what we do at Global Deal. We worked on that with the Ministry for Labour, and we want to improve the situation as part of the French presidency. Before the Minister for Labour came here yesterday, we talked with her. As companies, we have the necessary practical knowledge, and we know the obstacles. So we can identify the obstacles to put an end to these obstacles. What are the two main issues that we should draw our attention to, do you think? Do you think there are the same obstacles in foreign countries? I want to say something that is really important. Sometimes I hear people who say that in other parts of the world, people don't know what an apprenticeship is. For example, in Belgium, I send people to Belgium, they speak the same language, so it's not a problem. But even in Belgium, sometimes people do know what an apprenticeship is. What I mean is that when I was talking with my colleagues from LVMH, we agreed that all European countries should start working on apprenticeships. We talked about Germany, about France. Do Germans send apprentices to France? I don't think so. Yes, that is the issue around reciprocity. When I want to send people abroad and I'm ready to host people, Germany didn't agree. They didn't want to lose workers because they were worried that their young people would stay in France. That is a reality. There are shortages of workers in many sectors. That is a problem that is growing, and that is one of the main challenges. But we won't solve that problem here. I think there are two main issues: languages, but also, firstly, training frameworks, because apprentices work on a work-study basis. So they only spend a couple of days in the company and then at school. And then there is the financial issues. Traveling costs money. And it can cost money to the apprentice's family or to the company. There have been measures to improve the financial issues. But secondly, training centers are not used to let apprentices leave for a foreign country during school periods for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. Training centers are very important because they organize the academic year. Thank you, Jean-Christophe Sibores. Jeanne Arthuis, what about the cost of mobility? We heard about that. It is an important issue. Do you think it is a main obstacle for small companies? For the company, after 4 weeks of mobility, a contract is deleted. Then there are insurances issues in case of an accident, for example. Then finding a company or organization abroad is a problem. There has to be progress on this. Then housing and financial issues. How do you explain those financial issues? Skills operator cover part of the cost, but each one has their own rules. So I think we need to come together and talk about this and discuss the problem. Did you want to add something, Mr. Kaiser? I believe there are material issues, and I think we can solve that here. I think there are people who can solve those problems here. But we need to help young people as well. We need to give them the strength and the willingness to go abroad. We need to explain to them how beneficial it's going to be for them. Because there are technical issues, but that is our responsibility to solve the technical issues. And young people should dream, should want to travel, want to learn. That is what will make the difference tomorrow. That is why we need to keep promoting craftsmanship in France, in Europe, around the world. And this is how we will attract young people who are interesting. When we send young people to the US, they learn how to speak in public, they become skilled. That is what we have to do. Jean Arthuis. It is true, Eric. I had a great experience. We welcome a lot of migrant apprentices, and in that case, apprentices speak English. There is no problem. They speak English with passion. They want to have a better life because they left a country where life was difficult. So they have a strength that is remarkable for our training centers. They don't speak French, so we need to adapt. We need to teach them the language. But those companies, when they welcome those migrant apprentices, they want to welcome more of them because they are strong. That is important to say that. Pascal Bretomé, coming back to you, you need to turn on the microphone. When you hosted the young Hungarian apprentice, you were supported by a training center. It was the Training Centers Initiative. And also you received support from a skills operator. Without them, you wouldn't have been able to host that apprentice. That is completely true. I completely agree with what Eric said. We talk about skills operator. They are managed by CEOs and employees. The problem with skills operator is important. We need to overcome obstacles. Without the training center, I wouldn't have been to host the Hungarian apprentice. He was in my workshop, but he also went to school. So he also needed to be in school. And it was all planned already by the organization. When I was working with the young person, if I wanted to let him go somewhere else, I needed to put an end to the contract. So that is an obstacle. We worked a lot. We talked about it with the ministry, and they told us that we would solve the problem, and the problem is almost solved. So now, as a large or small company, if we want mobility in our company, if we want an apprentice to come from abroad, it is our responsibility to teach them, to help them, to train them. And we know that this person won't stay in our company, but we need to want to pass on our knowledge. The problem is not just passing on knowledge. I was listening to Eric, and it's true there is a lot of manual work. We don't need always to talk. We can understand each other physically. We bring together young people who have the same passion, so it's wonderful. So you think, first of all, what is important is passion, is willingness. Rachel, coming back to you about companies' expectations. From your point of view, personal, and from Angie's point of view, what are the expectations? On our side, we want simplification and smoother processes when sending people abroad. We already have a few solutions. We are lucky to have solutions in France already. There already is a website, Un jeune, une solution, a young people, person, a solution. We need to have a point of contact for them to handle the administrative aspect, financial aspect, etc. That is very important to facilitate young people's mobility. Next year, France will have the presidency of the European Commission. We are lucky. We heard the French president say that he was committed to this. So that is good news. He will be able to help harmonize the system. That is key to us. And one more thing, just wanted to add something to what was said. The legal framework is important. We need to make it easier, and I am certain this is going to happen soon, I hope. And one more thing, that is the company's responsibility. We need to make young people work for us. We need to make them want to discover new things abroad. If we don't do that ourselves, regardless of our size, we won't meet the challenge. And how can we do that? We need to show that we can train people within the company, that our jobs are interesting, are changing, and that if they come to our company, they will learn new jobs that do not exist yet. We need to focus on the future. We need to make them want to imagine tomorrow's jobs. I'm talking about GAN, but also about the company I represent. Tomorrow's jobs do not exist yet. So they will be part of an adventure. That's what they need to see, that they are part of a system that will enable them to discover new things and create tomorrow's world. That is how we will stay performant. In France, we saw it is possible to have that kind of unique platform. It happened over a few weeks only because it was an emergency. So it is possible to do it again with another site. But the problem is reciprocity. To have reciprocity, all countries need to change at the same pace to make the same progress. So Jean-Christophe, again, as a representative of Global Deal, after listening to what we said, what do you want to remember? And what are you going to tell the ministry? Indeed. Indeed, talking to Euro App Mobility, France has made a lot of progress, more than other countries. We are an example. We can be proud. So during the French presidency, 27 countries will be working together, not only a few countries. If we want to see growth, we need to expand geographically, and the French presidency is an exceptional opportunity. Of course, there are issues with contracts. We talked about that yesterday. I think there will be progress. We are waiting for legal changes. We'll see what happens. We hope that action will be taken after all those words, because suspending a contract after only 4 weeks is an issue. But that won't be solved before the next presidential election. That's not possible. Well, let's hope that it will happen after that. First of all, young people, you are right. There was one proposal. We need to help young people who want to do what we want. Because the problem is young people who cannot go abroad as of now. So, young people who are lucky to go abroad when they are still in high school, that makes them more curious. That can be a trigger for them to go abroad. In that case, that has to do with the Ministry for Education. But by traveling, people want to travel even more. Secondly, when a young person comes to France from a foreign company, young French people also think about traveling. They notice that they could also travel. So, reciprocity also helps giving young people the willingness to travel. At some point, we will have to do something. I am the president of a training center. We work with training centers, with universities, schools, with a diversity of backgrounds. Erasmus Plus gives bursaries, gives funding. There are OPCOs also which give funding. They will need to harmonize because that is still a problem. And when we are told that it costs 1,000 euros, we are committed to giving 1,000 euros.
When it comes to information, let's look at timeframes, calendars. All institutions, from training centers to other institutions, they say, okay, we're going to get the Erasmus budget. And some say, okay, some universities have 10,000 students, and we managed to convince 10 students. So in the end, education calendars are managed by teachers. So when you say 1 or 2 months during your school year is a long time. So maybe we need to change the landscapes. If you don't want to change the landscape for 10,000 students, then maybe create international sections that exists in high schools. So why don't we have that within universities and training centers? So to have so if you want to invest in young people, we should invest in that. We should have excellent sections. And who will you get in the sections? I might be an elitist, but you will get the best students. Companies actually want to hire the best because then we will think that those young people are talented and will be the managers of tomorrow. So I'm conveying this message to training centers. You should change your education calendars, your school year calendars, and how it's organized. The only time they can leave, it's when they're on holidays, and they actually sacrifice their summer break. But this is a lot to take in. There's a little subtlety here. The school year calendar is defined by the Minister for Higher Education, so that is a limit. Something we did not mention is minors. They also want to live. But going beyond borders, you need to be an adult, or you need the authorization from your parents. So we need to think about minors. 80% of young people in training centers are minors, actually. So this is our responsibility too. So now, can anyone here ask a question? Do you want to ask a question to our speakers? Madam?
Ici, tenez. Il y a madame en haut, s'il vous plaît.
Madam had a question up there in the audience.
Alors, merci de vous présenter.
Thank you for introducing you.
Bonjour.
Good morning. Thank you for organizing this General Assembly. I am the director of CNAM Training Center, so at the National Conservatory of Arts and Crafts. We've been working on international mobility for apprentices, and I'd like to react to what has been said because I actually wanted to say it as well. The absence of strategy of OPCO when they deal with mobility. We are cross-sectional, so we have OPCOs as intermediaries, and it's impossible to put in place a strategy for European and international mobility in our current economic model. And I'm not talking about the education model here, but an economic model. It is very hard to deal with mobility when you are part of a training center. And it's very hard to ask for compensation to companies. So it is very hard for us to actually make this mobility a reality, even though we really want that. My training center is located in Saint-Denis, in the north of Paris, and mobility for apprentices is quite high. Is not high, actually. Many of them have never left Saint-Denis, so you can imagine how terrifying it can be to get on a plane and discover a different culture, and how much it could be beneficial to them, actually. So that was my first point. What is your second point? It's related to pedagogy and learning. Mobility is, we're trying to put it, to make it a part of our curricula. So for mobility, we need to value this experience abroad so that the apprentice can then value it later and promote it in their career. There were two other questions. Enrique Calvé-Chambon, French and Spanish. Administrator for Euro-App Mobility and former MEP. And I was lucky enough to work with Jean Arthuis, and I have worked with him on pilot projects. I have three different questions. As a Spaniard, can you speak closer to the mic, please? As a Spaniard, I do not understand the last thing Mr. Rabotin said. There's always been a dichotomy that makes me become schizophrenic between the apprentice and the employer. In France, where you are a minor when it comes to traveling, but not when it comes to signing an employment country. That sounds odd to me. Secondly, Mr. Bretonnet said something that I'm intrigued about. He said that we should be highly flexible because, of course, it's not the same working within a garage as working in a company. And what I notice in companies is the real time necessary for the employee to become productive. So in a garage or in a factory, you might need to get used to working with the different equipment, so it might take longer than in other sectors. When I was younger, I was working with trade unions. You all are employers or part of an employer association. So do you think that we can translate that into an actual movement so that this is implemented on a wider scale using cooperation? Maybe in some countries it won't be possible. Thank you. Mr. Siberas, on this last question. The Swedish president who launched Global Deal is a former trade unionist. And for that matter, at Global Deal, when companies are a member of Global Deal, we tell HR directors to come with their European trade unionist representative. So at Global Deal, we're working with companies represented by their HR director, but also by a union leader, and usually from the European level. When employees say that we need to make people go abroad, and when unions say the same, it sounds a bit more legitimate. So if there's a social dialogue, an agreement will be much clearer, the will of the company will be much clearer, and the company isn't the only actor communicating, because unionists are there too around the table and are usually sometimes clearer than the boss. So I totally agree with you. When companies act without their social partners, it doesn't work as well. Thank you very much. Everyone needs to look in the same direction. This is very clear. Mr. Bretonnet, you wanted to add something? When it comes to trade unions in the automotive sector in particular, we have collective agreement, and this occurs with the employers and employees unions. And these unions are managed by employees. So in this model, there's a lot of decision making, and it works very well in our branch. As a boss, I want my apprentice to opt for mobility, and my apprentices want the same. When it comes to large companies, I can't speak on their behalf, but I think it must be similar. And there was a last question.
Bonjour, en fait, c'est juste une petite remarque. Donc, je suis.
So I just wanted to make a comment. I am a mobility coach and English teacher, so I always think about linguistic mobility because I think it goes hand in hand with actual mobility. In France, we are not very good when it comes to English. But there are possibilities. You can watch movies in English. You don't have to be at school to learn English. You can play video games, you can watch TV series, movies in English. So not only at school.
Merci. Alors, je vais être obligé.
Thank you very much.
C'est toujours pareil, mais on est contraint par le temps et moi.
We have time constraints, unfortunately, and I am the timekeeper. So, Mr. Rabotin, when it comes to minor apprentices, when there's a minor, the employer contract is signed by their parents. So the difficulty here is that the young person is a minor, so maybe on the employment contract we should expand it to a mobility experience so that the family is aware that there could be a mobility experience within the curriculum.
Madame, je suis désolé qu'il y avait le à la main.
Juste, je suis très surprise, il y a un mot qui n'a pas été prononcé.
I'm astonished. Semeni Deves at the Ministry for Higher Education. You haven't mentioned the word apprenticeship supervisor. I am quite saddened by that. So my next question is, how do you value the job of an apprenticeship supervisor and how do you make them promote a mobility experience? And can you establish partnerships, if you want, between apprenticeship supervisors and mobility? This is a very relevant question. Often apprenticeship supervisors are the employers themselves in small enterprises. Thank you for your comment and your question. This is highly relevant. Earlier, I was saying that companies had to play a role when it comes to the attractiveness of a mobility experience. So supervisors are here to promote this experience, but are also here to promote the company, to pass on this know-how, and this because this is crucial for the young person. So they actually play a key role in this mobility path. And when it comes to valuing the role of an apprenticeship supervisor, this could happen at different levels. So could you give us an answer on that? I think all companies are thinking this through and are implementing different things to value tutors. We have just gone through a pandemic, and this might have pulled the brakes on certain projects related to the role of tutors. But our role now that we are back on physical events, maybe we need to promote this role again. Although it was stymied because of the pandemic. One last word from Mr. Siberas. When it comes to companies, the role of an apprenticeship supervisor is important, but apprentices learn a great deal from their counterparts as well. So the whole team around the apprentice is key. I've been working in a company for 25 to 30 years, but as long as there's an apprentice within the team, a young person, it changed the overall dynamic of the team. And this is very efficient.
Le vrai sujet pour les managers et les maîtres d'apprentissage,
And what's really at stake here for supervisors, they all say the same. If we do not hire the young person because of the economic situation, this is an obstacle. Some companies have set goals with their social partners and have said, okay, we won't hire all apprentices, but at least there are actual goals. And there's also the question raised of profits for companies. But if we manage to offer a mobility experience to our young people, this is also because it is necessary for our companies. 10 years ago, I entered at Rhodia. I was at Rhodia company, and the team leader said, I can't take it any longer. He said, none of my workers here speak English, although they've been abroad. So he was very disappointed. So what we need to do is not to reproduce the Rhodia's experience, otherwise we will lose the economic war we are at. So let's put linguistic skills at the heart of this project as well. So that will be our conclusion. I will add that training a young person, even though they are not hired later on, is a positive experience. So let's conclude on this word, long live young people. Let's thank our 5 speakers and for the quality of their presentations and testimonies. Thank you. Without further ado, let's now turn to the second part of our morning session. Habib Maran, could you please come to the stage to talk about the validation of learning outcomes for a mobility experience? So what are we talking about? What is the regulation framework? How can we value a mobility experience? So we will try to find questions to these experiences.
Okay, so we can continue. Please take your seats if you're still standing up. Let's welcome Habib Marand to talk about a key issue, the recognition of learning outcomes. We will try to answer various questions. What are we talking about? What is the legal framework? What experiences are potentially accumulated? And you were a rapporteur for the CNCT, National Commission for Certification. When it comes to recognition of learning outcomes in mobilities, we know the ECTS system for university students has been in place for more than 30 years. And Habib Maram, you want to talk today about vocational ECTS, this concept. Could you explain what that system is, how it works? Thank you. First of all, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First, I wanted to thank this wonderful organization, Europe Mobility, and thank its president, Jean Arthuis, for inviting me as part of an important event that will lay the foundations of a collective ambition, an unprecedented ambition, the Europe of apprentices. This initiative will change the lives of millions of young learners in Europe. As for me, I am happy to be able to talk about that topic today. It might sound technical, but it is key for the recognition of learning outcomes and for the learning experience of many young people. You ask me about ECTS PRO. What can I say? First, it is an acronym. ECTS means a European Credit Transfer and Accumulation System. This is a complex topic, but it is an original topic in the field of education and training in Europe. I am interested in this. I created this disruptive concept. I first proposed this in Malta at a forum of ESVET experts when we were working on the 18th of June 2019 recommendation about those systems. Then I proposed something to my peers, a proposal called A New Name for a New Scope. What were the goals of this proposal? This proposal had two key objectives. First, improving the popularity and image of this system by giving it a more global influence like the ECTS system. There was a problem of image and popularity. And secondly, the objective was to reinforce Erasmus PRO. It was an initiative that was about to be launched the next year. The objective was to draw a parallel between two important instruments, Erasmus Plus and ECTS, for higher education. But there is always a but. This proposal wasn't successful, to say the least. It was too early to make the proposal. But now, today, I am delighted to talk about this again with you, to show you some of the elements that could be convincing to adopt this new system. With a new name, a new momentum, a new dimension. Indeed, recognition of learning outcomes is not a new topic at a European level. There have already been recommendations from the Commission to have a legal framework, so we could remind the audience of the main principles of this. Allow me to give you an overview of what is happening globally before talking about this more in detail. After the 2008 crisis, there were repercussions for employment for young people globally. Apprenticeship has seen an increased interest from everyone globally. Indeed, it is one of the most effective ways to fight unemployment. So many policies were implemented on several continents in order to improve education and training systems. In Europe, for example, there was a new framework for efficient learning, and there is now interest in long-term mobility for apprentices. This General Assembly has shown that long-term mobility is essential for professional integration of apprentices. To give them
Or, en ce domaine
greater
particulier, vous
employability.
l'avez à de multiples reprises évoqué, cher
As
Jean Arthuis,
we have said many times, there are still obstacles,
la
including
nécessaire prise en
the
mise en place
necessity
d'un
to
mécanisme
implement an
institutionnel
institutional
de
mechanism
reconnaissance
to
adapté aux
validate
contraintes,
learning outcomes
spécificités
despite
des apprentis.
constraints
Et on a eu
and
une
depending
illustration
on
faite encore
particular
lors de cette table
cases.
ronde. C'est une
And we will
équation
we talked
difficile à
about this
résoudre,
again
mais qui comporte
at the
de
round
nombreux
table.
paramètres.
There are
Et
many
j'espère
things
que
to
vous
take into
m'interrogerez
account,
plus avant
and I
sur
hope
certains
you will
aspects.
ask me questions
C'est
about
prévu à la
this.
fin de votre intervention.
Alors, c'est formidable.
I am planning
Mais
to.
pourtant, effectivement,
Fantastic.
en Europe, au cours de la période très récente, dans une
Indeed,
semaine
recently
temporelle très
in
resserrée,
Europe,
un
in
train de
a short time,
du Conseil de
there
l'Union
were
européenne
recommendations
a
from the
constamment appelé
European
à cette
Council.
reconnaissance
They called
des acquis
for
d'apprentissage de la mobilité
validation of
professionnelle
learning
des apprenants.
outcomes
Et effectivement, dans un
of
ordre antéchronologique,
mobility,
je
European
souhaiterais
mobility
citer
of apprentices.
la
There has been
recommandation
several recommendations. One
du 24
from the 24th of November
Oui, c'est la plus
2020,
récente. Alors, qu'est-ce qu'elle
the more
dit, cette-
recent one.
cette recommandation
What does it
Vous
say?
voulez que j'entre immédiatement dans le vif
Do you
du
want me
sujet?
to talk about that
Alors,
directly?
laissez-moi quand
Okay.
même vous
Please give me a moment to introduce all the
Le
different
corps du défi,
recommendations.
si je peux le dire ainsi, vous avez
Here
les trois
it is. You can see the
recommandations
three
qui
recommendations.
ont été prises durant cette période très resserrée. Alors, cette
So, three
recommandation
recommendations.
du 24 novembre
First, 24th of November 2020.
est l'une des 12 actions phares
It's one of the 12 key actions, constitutional actions, part of the European strategy for skills,
de
for
l'équité sociale et de la
competitiveness, social equity and
résilience. Ce texte
resilience.
remplace
This
hier,
text
la
is a
directive de l'agence
replacement
Erasmus disait
for
abroge
something else. It
la
cancels
recommandation du 18
the
juin
SVET recommendation from 18th of June 2009.
n'a pas débouché sur
SVET did not lead to the European system
Et ça, c'est fondamental.
we wanted for vocational training.
Mais également, cette recommandation indique
This recommendation also says that the ECTS system can be applied to vocational
au
certifications
niveau
at several levels of education.
et enfin,
Finally,
recommandation énonce
there are two key principles in this recommendation when it comes to mobility:
offrir des possibilités
providing
de mobilité de longue
opportunities
durée
for long-term mobility
ou dans des pays
or
tiers,
mobility to
donc
third
hors
countries
d'Europe, que vous évoquiez,
outside of
vraiment
Europe,
internationalisation
internationally,
forte et élargie, et
a
favoriser
strong
ces
and
mobilités via
larger
l'utilisation et la
internationalization, and
reconnaissance
supporting
des
these mobilities
unités
through the use and
d'apprentissage
recognition
et
of
des
credits
outils
for learning
européens
outcomes and relevant European
Vous verrez
tools.
que on retrouve ces éléments de façon
Those
récurrente dans les
elements
trois
come back
recommandations.
all the time.
Et enfin,
Finally,
second principe clé
second important principle, making the best use of European transparency tools such as the European Credit Transfer and Accumulation System, ECTS, and facilitating automatic mutual recognition of qualifications and learning outcomes from periods spent abroad. That is a key piece of information, a major piece of information, which brings together accumulation and recognition of learning outcomes.
Du 26 novembre 2018 qui énonce également des principes.
This recommendation has key principles.
Là, j'ai quelques petits points.
Here you can see a few important points
Recommandation du 24.
about from the 24th of November 2020 recommendation.
Très élargi.
Devant le micro.
It is important. Please speak in the microphone. But I don't think we will have time to go into detail. So let's continue.
Pas de partir, non, je me permettrai pas. Non.
No, I'm not asking you to leave. I wouldn't dare to ask that.
Alors, cette deuxième recommandation.
Second recommendation from the 26th November 2018. This recommendation has a long title and complex title,
Multiplicité de
which shows that there are many elements.
mutuelle automatique des qualifications,
Automatic and mutual recognition of qualifications, of education, of secondary training,
effectivement,
and
des périodes d'apprentissage.
of training time spent abroad.
Donc, cette recommandation,
This
dans
recommendation
son considérant premier,
first states
vraiment quelque chose
that
qui me semble très important et pour les
importantly,
praticiens, les personnes qui sont
importantly for people who are familiar with the topic, it states the following. Learning mobility fosters knowledge, skills, competences, and experiences. Those are key elements of the concept of recognition of learning outcomes. And that is a completely different way of approaching the system. You have to give explanation to understand the importance of this text. And there is a key principle, facilitating the mobility and recognition of learning outcomes abroad. This is a common element in all three recommendations. And finally, using criteria and transparent tools, which is an explicit reference to the ECTS framework, to pedagogical contracts. The same elements are here and are part of ECTS. There really are similarities between those two texts. That is really important. And finally, promoting mobility and its benefits. Here it is about raising awareness among stakeholders, among training centers, learners and their families, and as part of an apprenticeship, companies. But I think when it comes to apprenticeship, companies have a key role. Among stakeholders involved in mobility, companies have to be involved. As our colleague was saying, social partners have to be included as well. I am sorry, Habib, you need to hurry up because you won't have time to tell us everything. Okay, so let's go now to the 22nd May 2017 recommendation with a different kind of terminology, which now talks about credit accumulation. Credit accumulation brings together various learning outcomes that can be accumulated in order to get a certification. It also wants to focus on long-term mobility in order to foster mobility by recognizing learning outcomes with relevant European tools. I also want to insist on that. And finally, using transparent European tools to facilitate certification and recognition of learning outcomes abroad. That was in May 2017. At the time, the November recommendation hadn't been published. But we are still following the same principles. It is about mutual recognition of learning outcomes.
Thank you very much for telling us about the fundamentals of this European recommendation. What are the three conclusions from those recommendations? So after skimming through these recommendations in a timely fashion, let's draw three conclusions. First, the validation of transnational learning outcomes in Europe and outside of Europe is a useful and desirable objective. Secondly, the ECTS implementation fosters transnational mobility and the improvement of learners. Thirdly, last but not least, when it comes to our topic, the disappearance of ECVET as this credit system is enshrined and only ECTS remains in force. And this is crucial for us. It brings us back in time, 17 years back. It echoes intense debate that we had throughout the creation process of ECVET. The ECTS group of advisors in 2004 argued that the principles and modalities of ECTS met vocational education and training needs. So, along the same lines, the Director for Lifelong Learning, Education and Training Policies at the European Commission thought that and said that the creation of two different creation systems that could actually be competing was totally counterproductive and counterintuitive. And that is why he offered in 2005 to create one sole mechanism entitled the Lifelong Learning Credit System. So today, this is an even more urgent question. So is ECTS adapted to the constraints and specificities of the validity of long-term mobility of apprentices, or should we move towards an ECTS PRO or ECTS Plus for lifelong learning? So this is the right question to ask. So either we agree to enter this logic of the recommendation of the 24th of November 2020 for vocational qualifications in post-secondary and tertiary education, or we deploy a more inclusive and ambitious approach and moving towards an ECTS PRO that will be out of the European framework from the scope or level 1 to level 8, or having an ECTS Plus system that would work hand in hand with Erasmus Plus, but a more inclusive system that would take into account all qualifications systems. So let me give you an answer to the question asked, or at least shed some light on it. An efficient strategy to deploy long-term and certifying mobility can only occur if we have a narrow combination between the funding mechanism of mobility and the validation mechanism that is related to it. So we need to work upstream and downstream in a coordinating fashion. So this is what I would like to show you here on this next slide. This slide deals with both global reference instruments in favor of long-term mobility of students, both Erasmus and ECTS. In collective thinking, the Erasmus program is emblematic of this pioneer of the Renaissance period, Erasmus from Rotterdam, and people at the time called him a prince of the humanists. But Erasmus is also an acronym, or backronym for that matter, and it designates the European Community Action Scheme for the Mobility of University Students. So let's keep this in mind. Ever since it was created in June 1987, its designers thought it was a priority and an absolute need to create a credit transfer system. And at the time, it was a program to transfer classes, because it was in the 80s. Erasmus has been the legal basis and is the legal basis of ECTS. Some have totally forgotten about it, but ECTS is part of higher education, is part of the Bologna process. And don't remember that Erasmus was at the origins of ECTS.
Cette dimension particulière,
so there is a particular dimension, a coupling of both mechanisms, and this was key in contributing to funding and deploying both mechanisms.
Alors là, effectivement, on peut considérer que le processus de Bologne.
So the Bologna process launched in 1999 and the European space in 2010 became a reality through an institutional deployment in 49 states. And this enabled ECTS to be well known at a European and international level. I'll just like to remind you that you only have 10 minutes left, and then we will have a Q&A session. So you mentioned a coupling of ECTS and Erasmus programs. So what should we keep in mind? So to come straight to the point, let's go back to this strategy of this coupling strategy. It should give us three different options. Implementing ECTS in an urgent way for vocational qualifications in the post-secondary and tertiary education, developing ECTS PRO as an innovative and inclusive mechanism dedicated to professional vocational qualifications at level 3 to level 8, and finally developing ECTS Plus as a more inclusive and innovative mechanism including all education systems. And applying one of those options means the commitment of decision-making stakeholders. Of course, this is needed. So could you please present two different European systems that we should implement? Could you please be concise? So here you can see on the screen different mechanisms: Europass, European Qualifications Framework, Erasmus+, ECVET, Equivet. So all these were created in a very short time frame between 2004 and 2009. Europass 2004, European Qualifications Framework April 2008, June 2009 for ECVET and Equivet. So on the right, the two recommendations have been replaced by the recommendation from the 24th of November 2020. So now there are global reference instruments. I could tell you about the 50 million resumes that were created online over a span, a time frame of 15 years. And there are now 39 countries that are part of the ECTS system. And we will other countries will join in: Australia, New Zealand, and the European Agency of Turing Information is working on qualifications validation with Africa. So these tools are being used in a lot of countries. So Zero Barriers gathers 5 countries, and this objective is to give access to qualification to disabled people, especially when it comes to people in cooking and catering businesses. So this is a way to learn using visual cues, movements. So you meant visual and behavioral cues. What does it entail? So using a certain kind of sign language, or sign language that you learn over, instead of using sign language that can last for a month to learn, here you have to designate precise actions, professional actions, and after an accelerated 3-day training, you can use visual or behavioral signs to communicate. So this approach was developed within the framework of Zero Barrier, and it is deployed in many branches, in hospitals, in civil protection, and especially when it in training of migrants. So thank you. This is our approach to Zero Barriers. Zero Barriers is a certifying tool. It is recognized in different countries in Europe and in the world. When I talked to the French coordinator and I asked him whether he envisaged using it, and he said, no, that's impossible because you are dealing with disabled people. And this showed that one professional actor with over 25 years of experience in this branch wasn't aware of transparency tools like this one, made it possible to remove barriers, and that now we could use those tools, those more inclusive tools. You wanted to ask me a question relating to this second project? You are reading my mind.
Merci pour cette interaction. Oui, alors, Le second projet concerne
So the
VITA.
second
VITA
project
signifie-
is
c'est
related
l'acronyme
to
de
VITA.
culture et
This is the
éducation
acronym
pour tous
for
les types d'apprentissage.
winemaking and
C'est important.
education
Là
for
où
all
autrefois,
types of learners.
La taille de vigne était dévolue
In
aux
the
ânes,
past,
vaches,
the
travailleurs saisonniers,
wine
dépourvus de toute
size
qualification.
um,
Cette activité s'inscrit aujourd'hui
was
dans la
not
chaîne
for
de
was
valeur
not
mondiale du vin.
part of a qualification system. This activity now
L'objectif
is
principal visait à assurer la
part
montée en
of
compétences
the
et
wine
le renforcement de
value chain.
l'employabilité de la main-d'œuvre
The strategic
saisonnière
partnership
dans une
VITA
activité qui était
implies
conçue jusqu'alors
that
comme une simple
actors
compétence et
from
non un
several
métier à part
countries
entière.
are here,
Grâce à la mobilisation
and the
de ces outils de la transparence,
objective is to pool all those resources, ECVET, Europass, and the European Qualifications Framework.
VITA a
And
permis
thanks to those,
l'élaboration de deux unités
VITA
d'apprentissage
helped
qui ont été
create two
positionnées au
different
niveau
units
3 et 4,
of apprenticeship.
taille de vie confirmée.
So the
Aujourd'hui, c'est devenu
wine size and the wine pruning, and advanced wine
par
pruning
l'un des partenaires
curricula.
en l'espace de 2 années, l'école du vin de
So
Krems en
within
Autriche. Alors,
2
ne nous
years,
méprenons pas, ça n'est pas une école provinciale, puisque
a school was created in Austria. This is a center of excellence. It is called Krems, and it has one of the most sophisticated wine-making laboratory in the world. So a professional laboratory. And now we have qualifications for vine pruning and advanced vine pruning. And in doing so, there is a university diploma at the University of Bordeaux in the southwest of France. So this is crucial because in 3 years' time only, we managed to reach, to achieve that. So this is what I wanted to tell you about. I could mention many other projects related to the wine value chain and other sectors, but these two examples show that learning and certifying mobility for all has become something that you can access to in Europe, thanks to an effective synergy between Erasmus Plus and transparency tools for qualifications. And this is a message I'd like to insist on. Thank you for sharing those two examples. We can learn a great deal from them. It is now time to conclude before our Q&A session. So to conclude, you might have understood it by now. Projects related to winemaking are crucial. And this is why I wanted to focus on these two mechanisms. So let me conclude by using the wine metaphor. To do so, I have used this image on the screen. It is the homepage of Vinimob website. It was opened temporarily today and will be launched during the Erasmus days from the 15th of October onwards. So let me tell you that those grapes, those apprentices, those grapes full of multiple qualities and potentialities represented by the apprentices have a full and legitimate vocation to contribute to the highest expression of the plots and grape varieties that make up this exceptional European vineyard called the Europe of Apprentices, or European Area of Apprentices. This is what Europe Mobility is vividly calling for. In such a unique ecosystem that should become, in my opinion, a global reference, these grapes have are
et vocation
have
à
the
contribuer à
have a
l'élaboration
vocation and are legitimate to contribute to excellence wine.
millésimé et classé. En aucune manière, il ne saurait
In
être
no way
à se transformer en
they
raisin
should
amer,
become
raisin de la colère.
a simple, mere, bitter, and angry grapes. This was a great image and a great metaphor. Thank you for that. And I would like to say it dearly to you.
Une occasion unique.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have the unique opportunity to do something. No matter our role, we can change positively the lives of millions of young people. We can offer them unique access to new horizons, to new prospects for the common good of all in this Europe of knowledge, of skill, of resilience, a Europe that we aspire to. Thank you very much.
Merci Habib Marand pour cette riche présentation.
Thank you, Habib Marand, for this very rich presentations. Do we have questions in the audience?
Bonjour.
Good morning. Dominique Farah-Perret from the ANFA. ANFA is the National Association for the Automotive Industry Vocational Training. In ECVET, for me, beyond credits, there is an important notion to me. We have mentioned a great deal of aspects like inclusiveness, mobility. There is also the dimension of skills, and beyond that, the validation of skills and learning outcomes. So with ECTS, won't we lose what ECVET had taught us and all the lessons we learned from ECVET? So if we want young people to be included, to be part of the job market, we need companies to recognize and validate learning outcomes when those apprentices go abroad. Yeah, this was an observation. Yesterday, our speaker from Latvia talked about it. ECVET principles are still in force. ECVET for me is not a system, but a technical framework. And when it works to its full potential, its results are concrete. And I have worked with it. I worked with it for 8 years. So ECVET had a scope that was too wide. It was dealing with transparency of qualifications. It was dealing with the quality and structuring of mobility, with instruments related to quality checks, education contracts, assessment grids, etc. So it made us leave the traditional view that we had on mobility, because here we were integrating this mobility experience within an education path. So with this system, we created an added value. We carried out assessments in 2013 and 2019. Observers and assessors recognized this added value. To them, it was an improvement. It allowed synergies, and it allowed us to pool resources to speak from one voice.
Alors, les questions se multiplient.
There are more questions. First, this one, then another one. Okay, please answer briefly. I don't know if I will be able to be brief, but I represent Franco-German University. We have been talking about obstacles for 2 days on both sides of the border. We managed to send 400 students abroad every year, so it's more advocating something than asking something. I understand there are technical issues to look at. I understand that it is important to analyze the situation. I understand also that it is important to bring together general education and vocational education, but I want to advocate for something. No matter the standards we agree on, please don't create a new system that will take 20 years to be implemented, because we won't be able to use it. So what I want to say is we work with a double degree. It is difficult. How do we do it? We do it because we are very pragmatic with stakeholders on the ground, bilaterally, with agreements. So I want to advocate for the fact that we shouldn't have a new system with a lot of paperwork. Please let people on the ground work flexibly. They will make their own standards. We are capable of doing that. I want to insist on the fact that we have 6,000 students. Having ECTS is not enough. You need to talk with your partners. You need funding to talk with your partners. You need mobility. So you need people. You need something concrete. Thank you. That was a very convincing intervention. Can I answer to what has been said? I believe both things go together. When it comes to territories, of course, it is key. So what we need is to be able to use these systems to enable individuals to benefit from this system for their entire life, to benefit from professional integration, employability. I don't think we disagree on this. We have the same goal. What we need is to find the systems that can help us to achieve our goals. Thank you. 3 more questions in 5 minutes. 3 questions and 1 answer. I am part of a training system. Thank you for what you have said. We are very interested in mobility of apprentices at a first level, so at the lowest level of education. What we implemented is validation of learning outcomes within the company, because that is what is at the heart of that kind of training. My question is the following. When do you think we can find a stable recognition system, a common recognition system? What you showed us is very telling. There have been many different proposals in just 5 years. When do we find a final system? One last question. Okay, you can answer first. It is obvious that those elements are structural, so it will take time to implement them on the ground.
c'est que s'il n'y avait
And
pas eu
I
le
think
rôle
the
du convoi de
ECVET
transmission
experiment
pour assurer la mise en œuvre et j'ai
showed
été
us
bien,
that
engagé dans la mise en œuvre d'ECVET auprès du 3CA
being
BTP. Donc je peux peut-être en
committed
parler.
to
Et,
ECVET
bon, je veux dire,
was
effectivement,
not
ça
the
nécessite du
right
temps.
solution. We need time.
Vous dire que tous ces instruments n'existaient pas.
All those
il y a
tools
une
didn't
création donnée
exist
et que leur
15
création
years
a
ago.
porté ses fruits. Et elle
So
porte ses
our
fruits
work
aujourd'hui. Elle
gave
permet
results.
véritablement, de catalyser,
We
d'obtenir des
can
résultats
now
qui n'étaient ni
have
envisagés par les parties
results
prenantes,
that
ni
nobody could
envisageables.
imagine at the time.
C'était aussi l'objet de ma sensibilisation.
That is what I wanted to say today, part of what I wanted to say.
Très comprimé, si je m'exprime
C'est ça.
ainsi.
And I had to do so very briefly.
Stabilisation, c'est pas pour demain, peut-être après-demain.
Okay, next question.
Sébastien Thierry, agence Erasmus+.
Jean-Bastien Thierry, Erasmus Plus Agency.
Finalement, merci Abim pour
Thank you, Abim,
cette présentation.
for
Sur
this
le
presentation.
entre
Regarding
l'instrument
coupling
Erasmus+
between
et
Erasmus
les
Plus
problématiques de
tools
reconnaissance,
and
peut-être
recognition,
et notamment par rapport à cette option 1.
there already is something.
Un établissement qui délivre une
When
certification
a
d'enseignement
training
supérieur
center or
se lance dans Erasmus+,
a university
s'engage dans la charte Erasmus+,
commits to Erasmus Plus and its charter,
s'engage donc à utiliser les ECTS.
they commit to use
Alors, ce n'est pas
ECTS.
effectivement la panacée, hein,
Of course,
c'est
that
une
is
base,
not
notamment
a silver
sur,
bullet.
Des formations à vocation professionnelle pour discuter
That might
des
not
sujets
work
de
for vocational
compétences,
training.
de la manière dont on les
We
reconnaît.
need to talk
Mais
about
c'est une
how to
obligation.
recognize
Et alors, ça va
skills.
plus loin avec le nouveau programme parce que,
But that
nous,
goes
agence nationale,
even further
demande à la Commission
with a new
de
program.
faire un suivi de
We
ces projets, de la façon dont
are
c'est mis en
asked
œuvre,
to
et un
follow,
accompagnement pour qu'ils
to monitor
tiennent
projects
compte de cette dimension reconnaissance.
in order
La question, elle se pose effectivement
to
sur,
take
les
that validation into account.
CAP, Bac Pro,
When it comes to vocational certificates, there is no ECTS system.
La boîte à outils ex-ECVET sont
The toolkit, the ECVET toolkit was an answer for some time. Europass is another system that can be used,
On va s'efforcer à notre niveau d'accompagner
and we try at our own level
qui croient
to support projects. And we are seeing an increase in projects in 2022, 2023. There will be more means to support mobility.
sur la reconnaissance. Je pense qu'on a aujourd'hui les
When it comes to validation, I think we also have the tools. We have an
de l'enseignement et
expert
de la
team
formation professionnelle sera dédié à cet
that
accompagnement.
will be working on that
Merci pour ce
specifically.
témoignage.
Thank you
Je suis
for
désolé, monsieur, mais
sharing.
je suis persuadé
I
que
am
parents,
sorry,
après, notre matinée, pourra vous
but I
répondre
am sure that Habib Maman can answer your question later on. Thank you, Habib. Thank you for your questions.
Il est temps de passer à la troisième séquence avec
Now
la
let's
déléguée générale de Roer,
move
Paola
to
Bologni.
the third part of our morning session. Paola, please don't fall.
Et donc Paola, vous allez nous synthétiser les principaux
Paola, you will
enseignements
give
des
us a
trois
summary
acteurs
of what we learned yesterday
avec des participants
with yesterday's participants
si j'ai bien compris.
and
Donc, ce
people
premier carrefour
taking
d'idées
part
a été
remotely.
consacré aux facteurs de
This
réussite
crossroads of ideas focused on internationalizing training centers. For those who took part in the crossroads of ideas, I can see you're here. Thank you very much. First, what are the success factors to internationalize your training center? What can you do? There is one element which is Europe. It is one element, not the only one. We heard a testimony from Erasmus Plus agencies with people who supported various projects in France to support mobility coaches. That is not a simple training pathway, but a modular pathway open to all training centers in France, which are part of the network. The idea is that behind this, there is a success factor for internationalization. Having staff is a factor, not only because the law wants us to, but also because we need people who master that kind of topic and have the skills. I think it is key to meet expectations. Another very important element was sharing. That's something our Italian partner said. With a Center of Vocational Excellence, COVS, which is a project of the European Commission with the Erasmus+, internationalization with other European countries as a consortium. European countries are a regional ecosystem, but we also need national ecosystems and a dialogue between research, companies and training structures. Another important factor is networking. It is very important to have a network with reliable partners, with training centers that you can meet with, and learning networks with several stakeholders not belonging to the same categories. In the second workshop, very briefly, we talked about a complex and strategic topic, the recognition of learning outcomes. There was a small workshop before or within the workshop. I'm sorry, I didn't let you know. So, about partnerships, we launched a platform, Europe Mobility, in January. You saw a beta version, and the aim is to have various stakeholders in Europe gather and match. Les belles rencontres qu'on peut faire maintenant, comme on peut le faire maintenant post-Covid. Now we are able to meet after COVID, the COVID crisis, so we can start networking and we can use a matching platform. Second workshop, we talked about recognition of learning outcomes. I don't think we need to add more to what has been said this morning. The only thing I wanted to highlight was that the speakers we invited came from several branches. For example, they talked about CQP, Vocational Qualification Certificate, that can give certificates within a branch. They are not diplomas from the States, they are different. What does that mean? That means that in companies, there is a role to play. And we can experiment with this. We can try out new certifications, qualifications, also in the construction industry, in order to include long-term mobility in that kind of pathways. We also heard from Dita Traders, director of the Latvian Erasmus Plus agency, which helped us understand how her country dealt with EGVET frameworks, not expert systems. And we were lucky to hear from our colleague from the University of Montpellier. We could think that life is easier for universities because they have ECTS, but it is not the case. The University of Montpellier has promoted a degree that was created with 5 partner universities in Europe. They established a system, even with ECTS, they struggled to harmonize the number of credits. So there are still problems to solve together when it comes to mobility. We need to solve this problem collectively. Third workshop, another important topic that was touched upon this morning. How do we give motivation to various stakeholders to commit to mobility? There is no silver bullet. There are only examples. We heard from a Danish colleague, Roxana. She talked about a very special system in Denmark. This system supports company when the apprentices go abroad. We also heard from OPCO Atlas that works with another type of funding. OPCO Atlas, that works with banking and insurance. Thank you. And consultancy. Thank you. So that is a major group. And those systems work differently in different countries. In Denmark, that they have to do with companies, in France with training centers. Sometimes regional councils also help. And we also heard from someone from Erasmus Plus France. She introduced the wonderful work they do to prepare young people for mobility, before, during the mobility, and after the mobility. And that gave us an idea. With Louise, we thought, what can we do with such an efficient work method? What can we do for apprentices? That's something we thought about with ESN. Thank you.
Thank you for being concise as well. We are now turning to the fourth part of our morning session. Jean Arthuis, please come and join me on stage. You will present the manifesto of your app mobility, your recommendations, the pillars of this manifesto. This manifesto has attracted the attention of Elisabeth Borne, Minister for Labour in France, and she said it laid the foundations for improvement when it comes to mobility. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to give you my feeling. I feel extremely relieved. And Paola Bonanini is relieved as well. Euro App Mobility is celebrating its first anniversary. And along with our administrators that I would like to greet and thank, we had decided to organize an event. Oopsie, sorry. So we wanted to host an event gathering players who are determined to move forward, actors who know what the barriers are and who want to go further. So we thought that a General Assembly would be a good idea to do it and organize it in a great place like the National Conservatory of Arts and Crafts, especially in this lecture hall of Abbé Grégoire. But then, over time, we started to wonder and be concerned. Will people come and attend this General Assembly in a huge hall like this if there aren't enough participants in the presence of ministers or the President of the French Republic? We wouldn't look credible. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here. And you know what happens in a two-day event. On the first morning, we have a full room, but then in the afternoon, when it becomes more and more technical, there are fewer and fewer people. But yesterday afternoon, there was a lot of people. And I wondered, would people come? Will people come tomorrow morning? And you are here. So I would like to thank Paola Bonivini, Madame Doucet, Madame Assy. So a very small team. Of course, we were supported by the teams of the General Administrator of CNAM, the National Conservatory of Arts and Crafts. But all this to tell you, I feel relieved. However, I still have fears. I hope I will sum up well everything that was said yesterday and this morning. What we wish for is that we will approve our draft manifesto. Yesterday, in my introduction, I said that we should take into account everything that would be said. So everything that was said by national, international institution representatives, and everything that was said during the roundtables, to see whether or not our manifesto was relevant. So, before going further and delving into details, I would like to hand the floor to Jérémy Bostier, who is from the Compagnon du Devoir. I would like him to help me pay tribute to Compagnon du Devoir. I had launched a pilot project at the European Parliament with them. And thanks to them, we experimented this project to assess risks and obstacles, etc. And with Mr. Bélanger, Compagnon du Devoir were an extremely useful support. So thank you for being here. Jérémy Monnier, you have the floor.
Bonjour à tous.
Good morning.
Excusez-moi, mais je vais commencer par un waouh.
Allow me to say wow.
Alors, j'ai pas pu être là hier. Je suis venu que ce matin.
I couldn't be here yesterday. I came this morning to say that people were there because we knew that not as many people would be here. Unfortunately, I couldn't be here yesterday, but a representative of Compagnon du Devoir were there. So a General Assembly on the mobility is something, but a General Assembly on the mobility of apprentices is wow. So many people, so many resources pooled in favor of apprentices shows that we have understood how important apprenticeship is in our country, but also throughout the world. That means offer the opportunity to these young people the exact same thing as other students. University students. I was fortunate enough to listen to the transition to ECTS PRO, and this makes the recognition of learning outcomes a reality. Skills need to be demonstrated. So everything that we're doing towards this recognition, this validation of learning outcomes is extraordinary. We were fortunate enough, and we had the privilege to coordinate the consortium, and we started in 2016. And so now we have the opportunity to say what the barriers are and remove them. And taking part in this event, I hope it will help apprenticeship, at least in France, to take on a new role, a new dimension. Earlier I heard about apprenticeship supervisors. So I hope that all the work that we are accomplishing here will make supervisors understand how important mobility is and how it can be in an apprentice career path, be it young or older. So having the opportunity, thanks to Europe Mobility, to make mobility a part of our curricula is extraordinary. So thank you for the trust you have placed in us. I hope that we will keep cooperating, because this mobility has an international ambition. And so we hope that on behalf of all those apprentices, this mobility will be a reality. Mobility is something that you have been spearheading, and I would like to extend my warm thanks, because it is thanks to such projects that apprenticeship will have all its value back and will be recognized as it should be. So I hope this is Europe Mobility will see more anniversaries to come to promote mobility even more. Thank you, Mr. Monnier. Jean Arthuis. So let's see each other in a year's time or 2 years' time. Thank you, Mr. President. Europe Mobility is an association. We have modest resources. It is headquartered at the National Conservatory of Arts and Crafts. This makes us accountable. However, Europe Mobility cannot be a mere French association. When talking about mobility of apprentices in Europe, we need to meet the demand of Europe. This is why we created Europe Mobility EU, headquartered in Brussels, on Kint Street, and led by Compagnons du Devoir there. It is a non-profit organization, and I would like to greet some of the administrators that are with us this morning. And you must wonder how we can survive. We have a general delegate, communication managers, assignment manager, and soon a manager in charge of the platform follow-up. Of course, we will welcome companies, young people, training centers from France, but also from the EU. So we will have to regulate and manage all this. So 600,000 euros, that is our budget. 2/3 are funded by the French government. And more specifically, the Ministry for Labour. But we are trying to remain free and independent. When you work with the government, you still have to be candid and make sure you walk the talk. This is our mission, our philosophy, our ethics. Our association is present in Brussels, so it's a European association. Our dream would be to have Europe Mobility across Europe, in each member state. So we would like to be a major actor of mobility for apprentices in Europe. And now I would like to hand the floor to our treasurer, Madame Rittray, who will join me here. I met her when I was an MEP. She was the director of the main economic and financial committees, and because I was the chair of the budget committee, I was under the cautious control of Madame Rattray, and I asked her if she could be a member of the Europe Mobility Bureau and be there to keep an eye on our finances.
Merci, Président. Merci, cher
Thank you, my dear Jean. Thank you, President, for those kind words and for your trust. Good morning, dear participants. These 2 days have been rich, and we are concluding them now. We have had fruitful discussions. Paola Bolognini summed them up. So the discussions have been rich. We have learnt a great deal of lessons. As the President said it yesterday, our association has only been alive for a year, and I would like to applaud all the works that have been done to organize this General Assembly, and I would like to pay tribute to our team. This is a remarkable team. It has set up, make EAM well known with a lot of motivation and enthusiasm. Just like our President said, nothing would have been possible without the support of the Ministry for Labour and Jobs. I would like to openly thank the General Directorate of Jobs within the Ministry, because they were a great support as well. Thanks to the President, please take note of this. So we had a tax incentive. This made it possible for our association to publish tax receipts, and this, in doing so, donors will get tax cuts in return. So we will keep trying to find more donors so that Europe Mobility is more autonomous from a financial point of view. Allow me to say a few words on the European dimension of our association, as it is dear to my heart. The acronym is clear. There are 2 pillars: improving long-term mobility of apprentices and creating a European space for mobility on the model of Erasmus program and the higher education system. The Article 65 of the Lisbon Treaty states that the Union action aims to develop the European dimension in education, especially through apprenticeship. And it also aims to promote languages within the member states. Article 166 states that the EU should promote access to the job market and foster education and vocational training. So these skills are shared within the EU and the member states. This means that member states can legislate on these mechanisms and these topics. So we have all the tools, even the recommendations that we mentioned this morning. The speech by the President of the French Republic and other French ministers showed yesterday that there is the political will to foster mobility among apprentices. We also have the budget tools, because thanks to our MEPs, the Erasmus Plus program has seen its budget doubled for the next budget period, 2021-2027. So now that the pandemic has prevented young people from opting for mobility and has preventing them from working on their autonomy and other skills. We are relying a lot on the French EU rotating presidency. We will have this manifesto that will be our roadmap, and this is the way that we've paved with firm belief. Thank you so much.
Merci. Donc voilà. N'ayez pas d'inquiétude. Je pense que nous avons déjà quelques.
Rest assured that we already have some sponsors. I dream of a day when Europe Mobility won't need subsidies anymore. That being said, yesterday we heard from political commitments and very strong commitments, even from the President of the French Republic. So that might be a sign that the French EU rotating presidency will be dealing with the European space for apprentices and vocational training. The European Parliament also needs to be determined, and I would like to applaud the presence of an MEP who is with us, and I would like to hand her the floor, because I think she will confirm that the EU Parliament will meet our expectations.
Vous mettez où vous voulez.
Would you like to come here? No, that's fine. I'll just take off my mask. I am delighted to be here with you. President, my dear Jean, my dear Olivier Faron, our host, you are a precious partner of Europe Mobility. And I would like to say, my dear signatories or future signatories to the manifesto of a Europe for apprentices. Now that we have this manifesto, it won't be a dream anymore. What we've been going through this past 2 days is unbelievable, gathering all key players of apprenticeship throughout Europe and political decision makers from France and from Europe is extraordinary. And this is thanks to you, my dear Jean, and your pragmatism that it is possible. There will be a before and after this General Assembly on the mobility of apprentices, and this is urgent. Just like the President of the French Republic said it, mobility and the prestige of one branch go hand in hand. There is an emergency to foster mobility of our young people. It needs to be fueled by the wealth of the European know-how. There is also a political emergency. Our young people who remain in their country are not part of this mobility project. So this is our responsibility to create this bridge and make mobility a possibility to all. Apprentices need to be aware that they are the safeguards of a certain engineering, a certain genius, and of our European citizenship. The European education area will welcome a European area for higher education, and it already exists. We cannot tolerate that there is no equivalent for vocational education and training. Next week, I will deal with that with my counterpart for a vote in a plenary session to make sure this European area for vocational education and training exists. This is necessary. I want this to be a structuring component of education in Europe. This is a weapon against the financial, academic, social barriers that we talked about in the past 2 days. And this will be possible during the mobility experience. Having access to microcredits, for instance, is also a tool that we can use. We should also be bold to benefit from all the hybrid tools for mobility and all the possibilities they give us, especially for long-term mobility. And also, we need to remain flexible, to create irreversible synergies, develop internationalization, and develop linguistic skills. Why not increasing the role of training centers supervisors? Clément Beaune and Mr. Blanquer said it, and I have suggested it to them. I have also suggested that next year we can have the equivalent for our training center supervisors. Partnerships, the launch of a platform. Euroapp Mobility is being very pragmatic, and all their actions are necessary. And I would like to conclude on this. This will be fruitful if we all play our role. Thank you.
Merci, chère Ilana.
Thank you, my dear Ilana. Thank you for your very enthusiastic and determined support.
Alors, avant de vous interroger sur
Before
vertu de notre projet de
wondering about the virtues of our manifesto, I would like to remind you of its pillars. There were 5 prerequisites. First, the one related to the mobility coach within a training center. It is planned by law, but we understood yesterday that funding was not always a done deal and proportionate to the number of young people opting for mobility. So let's imagine that a training center has no apprentice opting for mobility and wishes to open an international training center. It will not be done overnight. It will take years for this to happen. So I think that we need to be attentive and give the actual means to training centers who have reviewed and overhauled their education curricula and thought about it long term, 5-10 years time, and are thinking of an international openness. It is necessary for them to have the proper framework that makes international openness possible. The one who will go towards young people and will try to convince their counterparts of the virtues of mobility, this person will make sure that education is provided in other languages, most of the time in English, but not only in the native language. I remember young people coming from Eastern Europe who wanted to come to France realized that there were no English classes in France. So if we want the reciprocity dimension with mobility, we need the proper framework. We need to also create partnerships, define the proper education curricula, promoting mobility, and taking into account qualifications in both countries. This is demanding task, and this cannot be accomplished if we do other things on the side. This is a full-time job if we want to walk the talk. So we need to find the funding we need to launch that. OPCO can be an option, but we have heard that it was hard to coordinate with 11 OPCOs. If you depend on several OPCOs and there aren't any common ground to work on, then you will hear from institutions that it's not working and that it shouldn't be implemented. So if we want to remove this barrier, we need to find the funding. OPCOs have a common vision and some common principles, but why not using other European funds? If vocational education and training is an investment for the future, resilience and the Recovery and Resilience Plan, which accounts for 40 billion in France and more in other countries, a part of it could be allocated to VET. And there are also the policies of cohesion. And their allocation is managed by governments. In France, it's delegated to regions. So regional authorities draft operational programs. So it might be about time to go see our regional authorities and tell them that it's their responsibility to allocate some of this budget to VET and mobility. I think that the mobility coach role is of the essence. No, not all training centers will internationalize. This rule won't apply to all training centers. But for those who are wishing to do so, you will need help and support, and maybe the ones who will be successful in doing so will then spread and do the same, and others will do the same.
From what we have heard since yesterday morning, I don't think we should change the first condition of the first prerequisite for mobility coaches. The second prerequisite is the creation of a developer role for long-term mobility at a regional level. That would help against the discontent around the vocational law that was introduced. I think local and regional authorities are partners we cannot ignore, and we need to work with them. A mobility developer has to listen to training centers that wish to internationalize. They need to coordinate their initiatives, information. Perhaps they could be in touch with Europe Mobility, and they will play a key role in order to facilitate projects. They will need to work with Erasmus France. The Erasmus France agency is a key partner in order to cover the cost of travel. Erasmus is there to help. Who will fund all of this? Perhaps the government, but I was at a committee on the future of state financial finances So I am conflicted. I think we should get back the money we invested in the European budget. It would be time. Because after signing various international conventions, we could take that money back and use it for vocational training and mobility for apprentices, for all vocational learners. I don't think we should change our second prerequisite. Third prerequisite, recognizing systematically learning outcomes during a mobility. Here, I think there is a political willingness. We heard it from ministers. But from a practical point of view, we can see that it does not work as smoothly. There are legal issues, administrative issues that impede what implementation of what ministers said. We saw that ECTS had been forgotten, but that perhaps there could be a new system, as Habib said. We could use ECTS, but we need to make sure that this will not change something that is important to professional organizations, such as the car industry. If the state cannot work on this, we will do it. We are also aware that another phenomenon could occur. If there is too much resistance in public administration, it could be tempting to try something else. We could try new initiatives that would not depend on public authorities, but that could be a partnership with social partners. We need to be clear. We cannot stay unclear, because doubt is not an option when a young person wants to go abroad. We cannot tell them that they need to spend one more year studying if they want to spend time abroad. We don't want to change yesterday's text, but what we could have would be a monitoring committee, for example. Those of you who will try out those new measures, you can report to us, and we will talk about it with the ministers and see where the obstacles arise. We can talk with the various stakeholders at various levels. Who could be part of that committee? Sorry, who could be part of the committee? Well, first, Europe Mobility could be the entity to which you report. And then there could be various ministers in each country. Because we need to be practical. And we could also imagine a tax solution. We could see if the administration could give permission. Imagine you are director of a training center. You meet all the conditions for a project. You send a letter to the academic authority you depend on. And if in 1 month they don't reply, you can assume that you have their permission. I think this is something we could try. Fourth prerequisite, companies' involvement. The roundtable this morning was very telling, very interesting. Without companies, it won't work. And we need to see beyond the companies. We could also involve public institutions. We talked with the apprentices from apprentices in Paris, and they do the apprenticeship with the public institutions in Paris. There are also people working in the health sector. We could create partnerships with public hospitals. So we can work with companies, but also with public institutions and organizations. In each institution, we need to make sure that there is a point of contact, a coach, a mobility coach, or at least someone who is listening to what we want, someone who will be in touch with people abroad, and perhaps a baker will agree to let the apprentice go abroad for 6 months. But in that case, we could expect that another apprentice from Italy will come to replace the French apprentice, which would be good for the company. And this is where it comes to the platform we created. That way, when an apprentice leaves a small company for a few months, that can be compensated by receiving an apprentice from abroad. And that will be a good way to foster mobility. Mobility involves reciprocity. And finally, we need a unified status for mobile apprentices. We laid the first foundations of this. There were resolutions by the Commission, the Council, in November 2020, the recommendations and the resolutions voted recently by the European Parliament. So we have the foundations. We need to continue to push in order to have a unified status for apprentices when they go abroad as part of a mobility. Perhaps that will be the first step to have a work status, European work status, but that could lead to reluctance from some people about competitiveness. So I am tempted to say the following. I apologize if that sounds pretentious, but we didn't plan anything. Do we need to change all this? I'm tempted to say no, but I would like to listen to you, to what you think. If we approve this text, that will be our roadmap. That will also be something we can use with public authorities, with the European commissioners even. I would like to remind you that we were lucky. We heard the president, French president, yesterday.
que l'on diffuse cette parole.
He said that it was important to spread the word
Et de volonté politique
for political willingness and vision.
des ministres.
We also welcomed ministers.
De l'ouverture de nos États
The day before yesterday, we also heard the President of the European Commission say that she wanted to promote a youth European area.
a été confirmé par Nicolas Schmitt.
And this was confirmed by Nicolas Schmitt, the European Commissioner, who was crystal clear on this.
Le seul problème, c'est que l'Europe n'a pas de compétences.
The only problem is that Europe is not competent for this.
Engager les États membres dans une plus grande
We need member states to be more involved in order to converge, for legislations to converge.
qui est en charge, parce qu'il y a deux directions générales à la Commission.
And we also heard from Mrs. Gabriel,
Et puis il y a celle qui se
from another commission, not the Commission for Jobs,
la grande prêtresse, puisqu'elle dirigeait le service jusqu'en 2017.
and our friend was also part of this commission
Gérante
for
du Luxembourg.
a couple of years before going to Luxembourg.
Mais nous avons entendu Thémis
We heard from Themis Christophidou,
qui était tout à fait dans le sens de nos préoccupations.
and she
Ce que nous avons
agreed with
entendu
us.
hier matin des ministres présents,
We heard from ministers Elisabeth Borne,
Frédéric Vidal
Frédéric Vidal,
et puis Clément Beaune,
and Clément
ceux
Beaune,
qui sont exprimés parce qu'ils ne pouvaient pas venir, Jean-Michel
and
Blanquer,
Jean-Michel Blanquer
Julien de
on
Normandie,
video, and Julien de Normandie, also on a pre-recorded video. They are all committed
de nos préoccupations et de notre
to
vision
the same
d'un espace
vision
européen
that we have
de la
for this apprenticeship European area.
de la part du pouvoir public
The public authorities in France and in Europe,
et de la présidence
as we heard from the commissioners and the parliament,
de la
there is a willingness to move forward,
et promouvoir.
to promote mobility and apprenticeships.
Nous avons entendu des évocations statistiques,
We also heard statistics,
d'évolution, de...
percentages.
Je me demande s'il ne faudrait pas créer un observatoire
Perhaps we could create an observatory
d'apprentissage
of apprenticeships
mobilité,
and mobility,
parce que les ministres n'évoquaient pas les mêmes statistiques.
because all the ministers did not have the same figures.
Factuelles,
So perhaps we need more factual data,
de sortie,
because there are outgoing mobilities,
en 30.
but we didn't have the same figures on ingoing mobilities. There is Erasmus, of course, but not only.
Les moyens de mieux appréhender
So we need to make sure we have the means to assess mobility.
que nous pourrions nous engager
We could commit to create a monitoring committee, as I said,
les difficultés que vous
a committee that would listen to all the issues observed on the ground
le ministère en cause en ait connaissance
in order to
justifie sa position.
let the ministry in question know about those issues. And we could also try
Et puis
a new procedure.
aux dispositions législatives,
And finally,
je pense
there is a legal aspect. I think the problem is that there is too much legislation, too many regulations. It is too complex, and that is an obstacle for those we want to help.
on l'a vu en faisant voter un amendement
We
sur le projet de
saw that
ratification des
with the amendment on the ratification of labor decrees in January 2018,
des contrats d'apprentissage, des
some
contrats de travail, à savoir
articles were removed
qu'on pouvait se
on
dispenser
work
de
contracts.
rémunérer l'apprenti
We
quand il
thought
partait plus d'un mois
we could
et qu'on n'était pas
avoid
plus
paying the apprentice when
responsable en
abroad
décision, alors que
and not be
l'apprenti était
responsible
sous la
when
responsabilité d'un maître
the apprentice
d'apprentissage,
is abroad in case of an accident.
Espagnol. On a si bien fait les choses qu'on a rendu impossible la rémunération
And
au-delà d'un mois.
that meant that it was not possible to pay the apprentice when they
Et qu'on a
leave for more than a month.
très encourageante,
Yesterday,
je ne suis pas sûr qu'elle puisse se concrétiser aussi aisément.
the conversation was very encouraging, but I don't know if it would be that easy to implement. So we need to be pragmatic. If you represent a company and you continue to pay your apprentice, I think at some point you need to agree with your human resources staff to change the name. It won't be a salary anymore. It will be a mobility compensation, for example. That would be important legally. We can point out to many issues, but what is important is the solution if we want to move forwards. We cannot stop when an obstacle arises. If money is the only motivation, it won't work. We need to give motivation to the apprentice, and we need to be focused on learning. We need to be careful with legislation. Often we feel satisfied after passing a law, but most laws do not make any difference. Therefore, we need to give more responsibility to stakeholders on the ground. And those passing laws need to do the minimum, just the minimum. And we cannot stop here. We need to go beyond the minimum. We need to make people want and encourage mobility. We need to make young people dream. People in training centers, in companies, we need to make them dream. We heard very convincing testimonies this morning. We need to convince families. Director, you are the director of an important training center. It is true, many of them are minors. So perhaps mobility should take place at the end of training when they are almost 18. And we can tell families that mobility is good for the child, to convince them. We don't want to tell you to do all of this everywhere, but if you understand that mobility is an incredible added value for young people, we need to highlight the interest for learners. We need to support them and we need to help them try. This is what we need to do. And finally, those who will try first will convince those who want to try later. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope this morning strengthened your convictions, and I hope that will give you the momentum and the strength to share your vision, your ambitions, and encourage people around you. I will now ask Europe Mobility administrators to come here to take a picture. And before that, I want to make sure that our manifesto project can become Europe Mobility's manifesto. This is not the French government's manifesto or the European Commission's manifesto. It is the expression of our analysis at Europe Mobility. Europe Mobility is made of important people in all the apprenticeship network. So I would like them to come next to me so that we can take a picture. Rachel Compin. Rachel had to leave. Okay, she left for NG. But thank you, Rachel, for being here today. GAN is important.
GAN has different branches throughout the world, and this can help facilitate and foster mobility.
Michel Guisambert,
Michel Guisambert,
Jean-Claude Bélanger,
Jean-Claude Bélanger,
Olivier Farron,
Olivier Farron, Anne Vitré,
Jérémy Monnier,
Jeremy Monnier,
Martine Reichert,
Martin Reichert,
Enrique Calvé-Chambon,
Enrique Calvé-Chambon,
notre espagnol.
our Spaniard.
Compliqué avec l'Espagne parce que y a
We have difficulties with Spain because there aren't any status. Do we have people from Catalonia here? Yeah, they are with us.
j'espère que je n'ai pas oublié d'autres,
I'm hoping I'm not forgetting
malheureusement.
any administrators.
Si vous pensez que le projet de manifeste
And if you think
manifeste
this manifesto can become
prêt à lever la
Europe mobility, can be approved, are you ready to raise your hand to approve it? If you want to approve it, can you raise your hand, please?
Alors, levez deux mains parce que ce sera encore
Please raise both hands. This way will be visible.
Y a-t-il des avis contraires?
Are there any people opposed to this manifesto? Are there any people abstaining? I don't see them. So this manifesto is unanimously adopted and approved.
Alors, ça va aller très vite maintenant, rassurez-vous, pour ceux qui...
Let's be concise, especially for those who have to catch a train.
Je voudrais vous demander maintenant d'applaudir notre petit...
Let me please give a round of applause to our team, led by Paola Bonanini and
Bien, je vous demande d'applaudir l'équipe
my other colleagues. Please, a round of applause for the Europe Mobility team. And I would also like to suggest that you should congratulate yourselves, because without you, this General Assembly wouldn't have been what they are about to become. And that is a powerful lever for Europe of apprentices. Thank you all. And thank you to all our participants, of course, and speakers. So now let's listen to a video with all the testimonies that we have gathered from apprentices.
Il y a un cocktail aussi à 12h30 dans la salle de textile.
And there will now be a lunch cocktail in the textile room where you were yesterday. Thank you all. We can now launch the video to relive the highlights of this two-day event. We now know that being trained internationally, being faced to another culture, other working methods abroad is the best way to be trained. A young person living abroad can develop its skills, and then companies can work with employees that are more confident. We think that apprentices should be enriched by this mobility experience in another country. This is a give-give. The apprentice leaves abroad for opts for mobility, but it is also a responsibility for the company. Young people gain confidence and become flexible and will become highly talented professionals. This gives them an open mind. You should go for it. This is an added value for training centers. Vous allez apprendre bien plus qu'en restant dans votre pays. The mobility of apprentices in Europe is necessary because it opens their mind and they develop cross-cultural skills for today's and tomorrow's Europe. Our young people are very much Europeans and we need to support them. It can only be beneficial to us. A technician needs to create added value for a company and share it with its counterparts abroad. Euro-app mobility plays a crucial role to foster mobility. Mobility should be a rule and not the exception. From the point of view of a training center, mobility is an opportunity. International mobility for young people is self-evident for them and for the companies that will hire them. There are obstacles to overcome to facilitate long-term mobility. Europe Mobility is here to support us and help remove those barriers and convince everyone of the value of mobility. Join the movement.